introduced into the energy world and the matrix world, I suppose, through Harry Oldfield when I studied under him in 1987. And I carried on doing various modalities. I worked in advertising for 16 years. I trained for 5 years as a transpersonal psychotherapist. I did TFT, all these things, eventually coming across EFT and matrix, and that's my modus operandi. I work a lot in the corporate world, and just recently have been looking at weight issues, because all roads lead to Rome, and if we're going to go in on weight, we're still going to lead to whatever is really going on underneath. So what I want to do today in the time allowed, and I've got a lot of slides here, so I hope you can see and you can hear me at the back, because it's quite a visual presentation. And I want to do a 360-degree look at weight issues. I'm going to be taking you to places you might not ordinarily think about when you're thinking about these things. It gives us as a practitioner a resource to think about when we have a client with weight issues. What else is going on? What is the whole picture? So there are going to be the internal influences and also the external influencers, and how matrix and EFT can really help address all those areas. So, just going to start with just the reasons, just taking a closer look at the reasons behind why people aren't losing the weight. And the typical usual suspects are frustration, impatience, inability to postpone gratification. You know, I want that bun now. I'm passing that shop, I smell that bread, I want to eat now. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to have it as my Weight Watchers points or whatever that I'm going to save up for tomorrow. Entitlement. I've had a hard day. I deserve this big cappuccino or whatever it is that you're yearning. The deprivation. I don't want to feel deprived. Who wants to, even in the word weight loss, nobody really wants to lose anything, and it really goes against the logic to approach this situation like that, because it immediately will put up walls. The sense of hopelessness. You know, I've got 10 stone to lose. That's going to take me the rest of my life. You know, people don't even want to start. Cravings, and I know on the training we look at cravings, and it's a really powerful part. I know that it triggered me hugely without even realising, sniffing a cube of chocolate. The self-image, family and social pressures. So these are the tip of the iceberg, really, when it comes to weight. So Why Weight is really the program that I've just started, and we have all these questions that come in. You know, why do I eat when I'm not even hungry? Why does my willpower evaporate at crucial moments? And why does this weight stubbornly refuse to budge? And the sort of typical things that come in, I always gain back the weight, I'm just naturally big boned, I carry the gene for obesity. These are typical things that people say. Diets make me hungry, I'm too busy, I've no time to cook, it's natural as you get older, health food is too expensive, my partner likes me like this, that's a really good one, and my whole family is overweight. So those are the typical things that you'd come across when somebody comes about, and I'm sure you've heard them and more. So basically, from that mindset, what we're saying is, we're just a load of big fat failures. We're coming in from there. But the question is that true, or is there something else going on? And I think as practitioners, we know the answer to that. So what's the most important organ in your body to help with fat loss?
Thyroid? The brain?
The brain. And the thyroid, the thyroid comes into it. And I'm going to go into various areas here. So essentially, we're a success, because 98% of our decisions are made unconsciously. And we're not failing we're actually successfully running unconscious programs to help keep the weight on. And it's an important distinction to make. It's a completely different place that you're starting from when you see yourself as a success rather than a failure. So in this presentation, I really want to touch on quite a few different areas and looking at the mind-body-spirit connection. I've mentioned the brain. I'm going to be looking at some of the physiological aspects, but also how the emotional aspects of programming affects this area, looking at the effect on the body, and also looking at how we interact with the wider field or matrix. It's very difficult to highlight any subject if we don't look at all aspects holistically. So we know about the effect of stress and trauma, and this has a direct effect on our body. We've all heard of the stress hormone cortisol. And this is the fight or flight secretion that comes from the adrenal glands, and it gives us this quick burst of energy that I've gone too far there. The quick burst of energy for survival. It anaesthetizes us. If we're being chased by a lion, say an antelope being chased by a lion on the plains, just before it's caught, it will have some sort of burst in it just to anaesthetize itself in case there is any pain, any repercussion of getting caught. But also the freeze response can come in at this point where the animal can just stop, the lion might be disinterested, and the animal has a chance to escape. So it's all survival strategies, and cortisol plays a very, very important part in all of this. And it's the amygdala that really triggers the cortisol. You have here the yellow thalamus. I don't know if this is all familiar to you, so I'm going to race through a lot of this rather than go into a whole biological thing. But the green pathway to the amygdala is much shorter than the longer arrows to our logical brain. So if we see something, we have to act really fast. And so we are triggered. The amygdala will immediately release the cortisol through the adrenal glands, through the HPA axis, which I'm sure you've heard of, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal, and get us running. And while we're running, we can think about it. Am I really in danger? And then we can bring in the logical mind. But essentially, before we know it, the cortisol is released from our adrenals. So what's that got to do with weight loss and whatever? But chronic stress is the thing that keeps us producing cortisol within the system. There's no difference to the mind from a real lion chasing you to some other stress-related situation. And that could be the threat of redundancy. It could be the threat of your partner leaving you. These will all trigger the same sort of survival mentality that will release the stress into the body. And the effect of long-term stress and cortisol within the system, it slows the metabolism. We feel fatigued and have mood swings and cravings for sugar, fat and salt. This is beyond our sort of conscious mind. This is something that is an imperative within us to give us the energy to escape from whatever the perceived threat is. It makes us store fat. It gives us excess nervous energy so that we want to eat more so that we can escape whatever the threat is. And also when we're stressed, we eat when we're not hungry. We're fueling ourselves in case we need the fuel to get away. Fast food as we're too stressed and busy to cook. And because we're too busy, we don't have time to exercise. So all of these things start building up a pattern, a long-term pattern, that makes weight loss even more of a struggle in the daily lives that we lead now, the stressful lives that we lead. So the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. And that's fundamental in the work that we do, because we can empower people to have a different strategy. And because we work so deeply with people, this is something that produces a real change in the response mechanism. when stress is reduced, the cortisol response is reduced accordingly. So is the question, why am I really eating? What's really eating me? Because this is the thing that drives us. There's an imperative again within us to go beyond our hunger needs. When we go to the dinner table, we bring our hunger to it. But we also bring our emotions. We bring our past beliefs, our programming, if you like. And so we reach our hunger level, but we keep going. We keep eating, because food has stopped being food anymore. Food is representing something else. It's giving some comfort, some solace, some panacea against boredom or anger or guilt or shame, whatever it is that's packaged in that emotional state when you come to the table to eat. So to have a problem, you have to be good at it. You have to be able to recreate a problem through your internal references, your emotional state, and your know-how. Our internal references are really our seat of power. We can try and change our behavioural responses to food, but our behaviour is dependent on what's going on inside. So if we can address what's going on inside, our attitudes, beliefs, memories, whatever it is that makes food no longer simply food anymore, then we have a chance of real change. So what we want to do is look at successful programming. Our beliefs about ourselves and the world, our associations with food, and our memories that are relevant to food and weight. And oftentimes in the matrix, we'll go right back to an echo who is told at the table, finish what's on your plate. There are starving children in Africa. I've slaved over that dinner. Don't you dare leave a crumb on that plate. Or the table itself might represent a war zone for some people. It's where they're punished for not eating, or they're overly praising. It becomes a different experience than just nourishing our bodies. And also our references and habits. We get into a habit so quickly. I've got to have my mocha chocolate cappuccino before I go to work. That's what I always do. And before you even think about it, you're there in Starbucks and you've downed it. It's a habit, nothing more. It's never questioned consciously. It's gone right into our unconscious mind as something we do naturally to set ourselves up for the day. So we know about programming. We know that between the ages of 0 to 6, that's when we're in this theta delta brainwave activity. We are in a hypnagogic state. We are super learning machines. We're learning languages. We're learning about the world, our environment. Is it supportive? Is it hostile? Our programming is really written at that point. And then we go on as we become more self-aware, and we go into when the conscious mind starts developing more fully at the age of 7, into modelling the behaviour of the adults around us and our teachers and preachers and whoever. And then later, socialising the teenage years. And I don't know if anybody's got teenage children, but that's the real life changer, I think. So we have the good times, which is great to remember, and especially when we're talking about the Sue scale, it's important to remember that not all memories are bad. We have a whole host that are great memories as well. And the bad times, all the programming that occurs between those stages. So by the time we're 6, the installation really is complete, if we're going to see the brain almost like a computer. But, as Matrix says, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. And that gives people hope. This contradicts their mindset of hopelessness and helplessness that can be a huge issue when it comes to weight, especially when people are really obese. It's a very difficult place to start from. So normally our response, if we were to be running away from a lion or a tiger or whatever, that's fine. We're hoofing it. But what happens if you can't run away from the threat? As I say, the threat of something going on in your life. So we've learnt strategies. We will smoke it out, drink it out, clean it out, drug it out, or you get the picture. We have ways of escaping instead of looking at the issue, the fundamental internal resources and attitudes that we have built up around food. And I used to be a serial killer. Because I used to love the comfort of, I could open up a box of actually it was particularly Frosties, I have to say, which just evoked this memory of being little at the family table when life was so simple, and it was just so comforting. And I found, as an adult, when I was feeling a bit overwhelmed, I'd reach for the Frosty packet. So we all have our escape routes. I might not have drugged it out, well, not admitting that on camera anyway, but we have our ways. So what we need to do is change the way we feel about the problem. And the art of changing the mind is really, this is not news to you, the past is over. It's important to know that. I think people forget and replay it again and again, and it's as real as it was then when we get into that trance state. The unconscious is like a tape recorder, and it will store everything. And when we talk also about the wider field, everything is stored. Every time you access a memory, you change it. And this is to do with the plasticity of the brain. And it's something that really was only recognized in the past 100 years. Before, we used to think that the brain was set. But now, with neurological science, you can see that the brain can create new neural networks and change. Every time you access a memory, you're looking at it from a different perspective, and therefore you are evoking change. And the memory does feel as if it's happening now. You can think of something that happened 10 years ago and still blush. Your body response will, like what I was saying earlier about this pepper incident, your body still retains it. The field will feed it. It's happening as if it's happening now. And we're told in life just to live with it. It's your problem, just get on with it, just live with it. Society supports us in, as Caroline Myss describes it, in our wounds, the language of woundology. You meet a friend and you want to get on well, and you might swap a little wound with them, and they'll swap another wound back, and I'll say, when I was young, I was forced to eat bananas, and you might say to me, I was forced to eat apples. I really understand. I can't go into a green room. I can't do anything. Those Granny Smiths. So when you come round to my house, I hide the apples. I go round to your house, you hide the bananas. Instead of saying, get over the apples, get over the bananas, our society just perpetuates it. We have groups that we join with other like-minded people, similarly wounded people. So the power really in all of that is that if you can recreate it, you can change it. And we know that. We've seen it with our clients time and time again. And a lovely quote from Wayne Dyer, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And this is going more into the quantum level and the law of attraction, and I will speak about that a little bit later in this presentation. So I want to introduce you to, you've probably heard of him, Dr. Masaru Emoto, a Japanese water scientist. Now he was coming from a place of experimentation. He'd heard through homeopathy that water has the capacity to have memory. There's no physical particle in the substrates that you use in homeopathy, yet it holds a vibration. And he worked with water from the same source, and he would expose one jar of it to, say, one type of music, or one type of emotion, or one type of word, simply stuck onto the jar, and the other one diametrically opposed. He's written the book, The Hidden Messages of Water, and his findings are extraordinary. He exposed the water, froze it, fast froze, to crystallize it, and then took photographs. And what you have in the top here, which you probably can't see at the back too well, heavy metal music, couldn't even form crystals when it was frozen. You make me sick, I will kill you. There's a very strong message. Again, very distorted. Adolf Hitler, even the name, had a different vibrational quality to it. As opposed to the amazing, these shapes here, thank you, love and appreciation, and Mother Teresa, the beautiful balance in the water crystallization that was there. Now you might ask, why is that relevant? Well, the thing is, our bodies are 60 to 70% water. Our thoughts affect our bodies, even on this level. And he did an experiment with rice. One jar with I love you, one with I hate you. The rate of decay was extraordinary between the two. And this is a repeatable experiment. It's been done many hundreds of times. It's almost like the effect of I hate you is like microwaving the rice. There's a different vibrational frequency that the rice is exposed to, and it seems to accelerate its rate of decay. So the importance of self-love is critical when it comes to doing anything for the body. We're fed these images in the press, these unattainable images of airbrushed models and stick-thin models and these uber-healthy models. And it's a ridiculous situation. So why don't we start a revolution? Start loving your body. If your client or yourselves don't start from that stance, why on earth would you bother looking after it? Why would you feed it good food? Why would you exercise it? Why would you do anything if you can't love it first? But along the way, we've got to negotiate a few potholes, and there are many out there. And coming from a marketing background, again, I'll touch on a few of those there that you might be consciously aware of, but not realise the implications when it comes to weight loss. So cravings, very interesting area really, because it seems to be something that's beyond our control. And even the thought of getting a reward, whatever your choice is, can set up a craving that would last 24 hours within your system. So it becomes an obsession. You start obsessing. Cravings really hang around for much longer than we think they do. And everyone has their own triggers and internal influences when it comes to your particular choice. So food choices. I'm going to look at the effects and the influences, the internal responses, the external manipulators, because information is power when it comes to this arena of food and food choices. In some ways, you could say there is a bit of a war going on for your calories. There's a lot of money involved in keeping people eating much more than is good for them. So our internal responses, dopamine, neurotransmitter, we know that it's to do with the reward circuitry within the brain. And when this gets hijacked, it can lead to addiction, when it's triggered a lot. So in other words, it helps you to know when you've done something good, so you get a reward, and tells the brain, do that again, so you can get that reward again. So who's the addict? We've got here 4 brains. The normal one, top left, obese person, alcoholic, bottom right, cocaine user. Area there is the reward centre that I've referred to. And that's a healthy brain. You get a reward, that lights up. You get lots of dopamine. If it's triggered too much, the brain will start shutting down some of the receptors. So in the case of the obese person, one cupcake ain't doing it anymore. You're going to have 5 to get that same reward principle triggered. The alcoholic and the cocaine user, similar things. The biochemistry between these addictions, if you like, is strikingly similar. There's even this drug vernacular, isn't there, when it comes to food. You know, I've got to have my coffee fix. You know, I'm desperate for something sweet. It actually penetrates our language as well. So, a little word about genetics and environment. Genetics loads the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. That's a sort of a standard setup now in the scientific community. It used to be thought of as, the central dogma, according to, Bruce Lipton's work. I'm sure we've all read his books. Was that genetics was the thing that we were victim to. So the Paleolithic ancestors, famine was common. We needed dopamine to drive us to seek out food that had vitamin C in it or something, to seek out something that was sweet, seek out the fat, to keep us from suffering when the famine came about. So when there was times of abundance, dopamine would drive us to seek out our food. Insulin helped to store it. But our genes simply don't know what to do with 24-hour food availability. But is it the genes or the environment? The Pima Indians, they lived in really quite hostile desert conditions, and they survived well. They had what was called the thrifty gene that did exactly that. When it was times of famine, they were lean. When it was times of abundance, they could store fat in preparation for the next time of famine. But what happened was they came across the Western culture. Their culture was eroded and the Western culture adopted. They also, with that, took on the standard American diet, the SAD diet. And that combination alone, hey presto, the Pima Indians are the most obese race of people in the world. They have the highest rate of type 2 diabetes. Half of them are blind. Need to get a trip to the grocery store with them in somebody else's truck. But the environmental factors are what are interesting here. You have the Arizona Pima Indian tribe, genetically identical to the Mexican Pima Indians. The Mexican Pimas are lean and mean fighting machines. They haven't changed their culture and they haven't changed their diet. And that is the only difference between the two tribes. And there's a very low, it's virtually non-existent, even the word diabetes, in the Mexican Pimas. So the environment has a huge effect on our genetic expression. So the whole field of epigenetics is extremely exciting, the work that's been going on there. And the fact that we have control over our gene expression. DNA is not our destiny. And Bruce Lipton's work, the influence of our thoughts on gene activation, is really, really interesting stuff. How you can switch a gene on or off. Your thoughts will be triggering dopamine, cortisol, all sorts of the environment that the cell is swimming in will put it into a state of survival or growth. So we need to develop a new mantra, really. The food is going to feed my body with everything it needs. To actually set up a different thought system and different approach to what we eat. But there are so many triggers and traps along the way. In our society, we have the supersize me. We have additives put into the food to make us crave it. We have eating on the run. We're just too busy and too stressed to go and sit down in the kitchen and have a meal. We'll grab something quick that's just going to give us the fix that we need. And the convenience, and also the contrary advice that we get. One diet's kingpin one week, another diet the next. We don't really know. There's so much confusion out there as to what is good for us. I mean, you get government-sponsored food pyramids, the Dairy Council or the Meat Council sponsoring food pyramids. Who are they going to put as, the one to choose? So our sweet tooth does get us into a bit of trouble. But it was there biologically, we're hardwired towards things that are sugary or fatty or salty as part of our survival. So we crave sugar. Just thought I'd throw that in there. So a little word about the external manipulators, or what I'd like to call the hijackers. We have a thing called super stimuli. They did some experiments with geese where they gave a goose a large, super-sized egg with no goose in it, but it was super white, bright, large, and it ignored its own egg and sat on the big one. Wow. It disables our behaviour control switch. We see something big. If we go into a all-you-can-eat sort of restaurant, what do? We fill our plates up, don't we? We want big. We want it now. And junk food is like rocket fuel for our taste buds. They've also done experiments with lab rats, and they'd have one set that were given so much food that they really couldn't eat any more, and the other lot that were deprived. Then they put a bowl of Fruit Loops out, and each group ran like Ferraris to get to the Fruit Loops. They would even go over electrified metal plate floor to get to the Fruit Loops. The colour, the smell, the fat, the sugar. Irresistible. We also have a thing called palatability. Now this is an area where you have some of the leading brains in science working on. It's to do with getting the exact ratio correct between fat, sugar and salt in our food to make us crave it. And they're all guilty of it.
Wow.
This is a science. This is something that goes on that really we think, oh, it tastes nice, oh, I want another, and oh, it hasn't really filled me up, you're hungry again in half an hour. This isn't coincidence. This is sales. This is money. This is big bucks. We also have the Pavlov's dog effect. We all know, show the dog the meat, salivates, digestive juices start going, meat and the bell, take the meat away, just ring the bell, and still the digestive juices start. We have Pavlov's dog when we're shopping in the supermarket. I know from the advertising world how much money is spent on food photography. It's really, to make these look palatable, half the time they're not edible because they have to make them look really palatable for exactly the reason that they want you to get your digestive juices flowing, and you make that impulse purchase as you walk by. And not only that, they get us from cradle to grave. Kids are programmed. This is all programming. I spoke earlier about being programmed between the age of 0 to 6, but it's still going on. And because it's so unconscious, we are hardly aware of it. We just see it as innocuous fun, Disney character here, lovely picture there. But it's really doing stuff. And if that doesn't work, why not appeal to your sense of guilt? We'll be offended if you refuse our new 99-cent double cheeseburger. The messages are out there, all around us, and because we're not conscious of it, it's going straight into our unconscious mind. So, little quiz. What's the second most recognised word in the world after OK? It could just as well be. could just as well be. Which logo is recognised by 94% of the world's population? I think you're around the right spot there. What brand spends more on advertising than Apple and Microsoft combined? It is Coke. I worked on this brand for about 4 years. They have a lot of money to spend. 1.6 billion drinks consumed each day, sold in virtually every country in the world. That's about 200 countries. In 2010, Coca-Cola became the first brand to top the £1 billion annual grocery sales in the UK alone. And I'm not particularly picking on Coca-Cola, really. I have a few bugs to bear with the actual client there. But the fact is, when you've got that sort of money, you can do a lot. You can employ the best brains. You can buy governments. And they have. There's a lot to be said, but obviously not here. So brands, a little word about brands. People identify with their brands. They become an extension of their personality. It gives a signal to others of acceptability. And you can belong to a club, or you can pick a niche brand and you can express your individuality because you're drinking, eating, wearing that brand. So this continual programming, just an example. With this global brand, that means that you'll be accepted everywhere. You drink us, you're part of the club. Every country has its message. The fact that it's been around since 1886, the message there is, you can trust us. And you're so sexy when you drink our brand. All of these images, they are symbols, they are metaphors, and they speak to the unconscious mind directly. You're a legend. You know, they will do PR shots of famous celebrities or whatever. They've even got Lenin involved there somehow. You're so fit and healthy. Look at the Olympics. How can a sugary drink derived from a cannabis plant suddenly become healthy? Well, it can do it if it sponsors a big sporting event. And we're just like you. We understand you. We play football, we go racing, we do music, we do clubs. And they've owned Christmas. Santa was a green elf until the 1930s when the Sunblum artist painted Santa in Coca-Cola gear. They own Christmas. Some people say, oh, I don't feel like it's Christmas unless I've seen the Coke lorry ad on the telly. And we look after you. We know that you are into fashion. We know you're into beauty. You've got, you know, John Paul Gaultier, you've got Karl Lagerfeld, Heidi Klum, even got Clinton. This is well thought out programming. And don't even get me started on aspartame in Diet Coke. You know, just make like the ants and avoid it at all costs. Extremely toxic. It breaks up into methanol and formaldehyde in your body. So, who's smiling now? Is it Mukta Kent, the chairman and CEO of Coca-Cola? Or it's not us? And that's just Coca-Cola. I'm speaking of all brands, all fast foods here. I'm not just picking on them. It's just they've got the money that can do things on a big scale. We've also got counterthink. So this is introducing confusion into the mix. Monsanto, huge company, responsible for many dodgy things in the world. they're putting out this message of, chemicals, they're fine. You get chemicals in an orange. Nature has chemicals. We have chemicals too. And by juxtapositioning those two phrases alone sends confusion out there. It's very, very simple tricks of the mind, and they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. So read the labels, really. If you can't pronounce the ingredients, think before you buy, because a lot of the chemical additives, the body's response, bringing it back to weight again, is to surround the toxin with fat to protect the body from poisoning. So it has a direct implication on weight and weight issues. Reduce the chemical toxicity in your environment and you will naturally detox. And that includes cleaners and washing detergents and all of these things that we surround ourselves with. So.
I've heard people say too much
just thought we'd go into falling back in love. Okay.
I don't know about that.
Thank you, Barry. So, re-imprinting, taking it back to basics. Hippocrates, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. It's a beautiful, beautiful phrase. And when you really think about it, it makes a lot of sense. And there are clues out there. In nature, I'm a broccoli and I look like a tree. I'm a walnut, I look like a brain. I'm a mushroom and I hate this game. But the thing is, the clues are out there. The kidney bean looks like the kidneys. All these foods are good for the thing they look like, and more. The alveoli in the lungs, the dark grapes. Carrot, eyes, walnut, brain, ginger, stomach. Tomato, the 4 chambers, and red, the heart. The grapefruit for the breast tissue. The avocado, or generally pears, but particularly the avocado, for the the female reproductive system. Celery for the bones. Bananas make you feel happy. And ginseng for the whole body. And this is just a small selection. You start playing around with this and it gets really fun. But who are we feeding anyway? Our cells. I think it's possible that there's life on other cells. No way, you're crazy. We are body as community. And what that means is, we've got upwards to 100 trillion cells within our body. That's 10 to the 14. That's huge. And we're just basically like one big giant petri dish of cells. All sorts of different variations within the body. But there is this question, whose body is it anyway? Did you know that 90% of our bodies is microbial? 10% is human. We have more microbe DNA in our body than we do human DNA. A lot of them help, they encode enzymes, they are involved in vitamin production, helping us to digest food. Lots of them are very, very useful. They did an experiment on 2 groups of mice again. I'm not really into experimentation, but it illustrates the point. One obese set and one lean set. They transplanted the flora from the digestive tract of the obese mice into the lean mice, and the lean mice became obese. So there's a lot going on. The whole area of the gut, if we think about this gut area, it's the size of a tennis court. It's pretty big if it was laid out. And it's 70% of our microbes are in the gut. So just going back to Hippocrates, he saw that a lot of issues to do with health, well-being and weight were to do with the gut. So essentially we need to be feeding our cells. We need to be feeding the microbes as well. We need to be feeding ourselves with nutritious food. which will correspondingly put the body into a state of balance where it will naturally default to the weight that it is healthy at. Our bodies know what to do if we only give them the chance. So be a benevolent dictator. It's a form of government in which an authoritarian leader exercises political control for the benefit of the whole population, so your microbes and yourselves, rather than exclusively for the benefit of himself or herself. So it's just putting that in there, that remember who we're feeding. I want to talk about the mind, body and spirit. Now this quote that's attributed to Einstein, but people think it's Bashir. Have you heard of this channeled being? Everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. And Tesla, if you wish to understand the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. So, I'm going to go through these quite quickly now, because we know we're pulsating energy. We know we have a human energy system, we interact with each other, and we interact with the wider field. They have bioresonance, which isn't exactly the aura, but it's the interference pattern between a before and after treatment. And we have a sannyasin here who's meditated all his life, and the way that he affects the field around him is quite evident. And if you imagine the possibilities when we're talking about our energy body and our field. The Curlians, Semyon and Valentina, they produced this effect, this corona around objects in Russia in the 1930s. They were famous for the phantom leaf effect. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, where they pictured the leaf, cut off the top, and there was the blueprint of the field still in place, the phantom leaf effect. And so what? They produced some pretty pictures. But when you put this to raw and organic food, you'll see a huge difference between the corona, the energy within that food. Because if we have an energy body, we need to be feeding it as well. You have organic and raw versus cooked and commercially grown. And if you ramp that up to superfoods, where we're talking about sprouted seeds, spirulina, goji berry, or raw cacao, you can really see how your energy body can be fed as well. It's not just on a physical level that we're talking about. So it's a difference between dead versus life force foods. Intuitively, we know what's good for us, but these are loaded with hidden triggers. Free range. If you choose to eat meat and fish, why not choose happy meat and fish instead of putting in the energy, if you like, and the growth hormones and antibiotics and whatever that's there in the mass-produced meat. Advantages of drinking water as opposed to, say, caffeine. I don't know if you can see this, but this was done by NASA in 1995, where they put these substances, LSD, speed, marijuana, and caffeine, into the fly that the house spider ate. And he did a spacey job with the LSD, as expected. Speed, it went really fast and lost interest. Marijuana, it was like a bit trippy and it sort of did a bit and went off. Caffeine, it couldn't even spin a web. It's not innocuous, this stuff that we're putting into our bodies. The food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. Everything's energy. And that's why energy modalities are our greatest tool. And EFT and matrix reimprinting are an art. We can reclaim the sovereignty with direct action using these modalities. We release traumas and unhelpful, unconscious patterns, and we produce real and sustainable change. We interact with the field. We have the thalamus in the brain, but looking at some of the pictures in ancient Egypt of the Eye of Horus, which directly mimics this thalamus area, there might be something more to it when it comes to interacting with the field. The pineal gland. They must have done ancient dissections and seen it looks a bit like a pine cone. And what you find, there's a caduceus symbol, the Buddha, the Pope's staff, the court of the pine cone at St. Peter's in Rome, Sumerian gods, Dionysus, all with this pine cone. Something's going on. It must be important. And why I'm mentioning that is this is an MRI scan of the pineal gland in the brain. The only reason we can see it is because it's calcified. That cuts the pineal gland from interacting with the field. The only reason it's calcified is to do with the fluoride debate, or I'd like to say scam. There's a lot of work to do with how dangerous fluoride is to your system. So the brain-heart connection, we want to keep that as strong as possible. I won't go into that. We know how the brain receives, the heart transmits. The power of intention, when we're looking at the quantum level, energy flows where attention goes. When you're not looking, I'm just a waveform. This whole thing about potentiality, the difference between what you expect to happen and what happens. Whatever we think about, we bring about. So watching our thoughts. The universe is not punishing you or blessing you. The universe is responding to the vibrational attitude you're emitting. Abracadabra actually means, with my words, I create. We're continually casting spells. You know, our parents, teachers, preachers, siblings and peers, our self-talk and internal representations, our beliefs, memories and attitudes, and the media and advertising. We are continually surrounded, and the only way to break these spells is to create a new agreement with ourselves. And we do that through matrix re-imprinting. We reinstate a sense of calm and balance, clear blockages in the energy system, rewrite redundant programming, install positive default settings, and allow fine-tuning to the field. Pretty good stuff in one modality. And there's real physiological change. We know that the neural network within the prefrontal cortex has changed, and that helps us to increase our willpower and our ability to say no. So, summary for weight loss, reclaim your brain, eat nutritious foods. It's quite simple when you get down to it. Don't know why it took so long. Take regular exercises. So the mind, mouth, and muscle, according to Dr. Pam Peake and her book, The Hunger Fix. Target your clients' triggers and beliefs so they are empowered to create the body and the life that they really desire. We are multi-layered beings. Lose the emotional weight from the past to live more fully in the now. Tune into healthier choices and create a better future. And the really trippy bit, in the quantum world, the past and future do not exist. There is only the now. If you realize how powerful you are, positive and negative thinking would never bother you again. So when your client comes in saying they're a failure, you've got some sort of idea that there's a lot more going on. If they can go out looking like that, celebrating their uniqueness, I think you've had a good day. So there you go. I speeded up because I was taking up a lot to get through there. So.
Wonderful. That's a great.